This is a code walkthrough for the example file Formats2.java. This file was cited at the end of the current lecture materials on format specifiers. This is a nice file because it contains multiple examples of formatting applied to more realistic program outputs and calculations. So let's open up this file and have a look. So before trying to compile and execute this file or run through it with the debugger, let's talk it through a little bit. As you might be able to infer from this data initialization, there are going to be three calculations performed. A batting average, the calculation of some car price in both US dollars and Japanese yen, and then some stuff having to do with strings and an employee ID number and some zero padding. Up here we've got some program constants defined, one for the Placer County sales tax and one for some representative foreign exchange rate, which was current as of the time I recorded this lecture. So let's scroll down a little bit and show this next part. So what we're doing here is we're defining completely separately from the actual print statements a bunch of format specifiers that are going to describe to us how we want the output data to be displayed. And we're going to use these to do printing in three different ways. First, we're going to print data out using system.out.println to show the raw data format. Then we'll use system.out.printf for one type of formatted output, and then we'll print the same data out using string.format along with println. So if we look at these format specifiers, here are two of them for batting average. They're pretty much identical. We're going to have a batting average printed out with the usual 3 decimal place format for some floating point number. Here we're going to show the price using 2 decimal places and 3 space separation with the commas, as we see here. For this next one, we're also going to print prices out in the same way, but we're going to preface it with this embedded Unicode character. This is the Unicode character for the yen symbol, and notice how we've incorporated that into our printing format. For this previous one, it was a $, and it was just added to this string literal. Finally, in this last one, we're going to print some string, some tab separation, and then we're going to print the employee ID out in a 3 space wide field with some leading zeros. So in all cases, we've got 2 format specifiers for each data quantity, and they're separately identified. The first one is going to be for printf, which, if you remember, doesn't actually put a new line character in for us, so we have to add that with this embedded new line character. The second one is going to be used for format, so this is going to be used to create a string which will then turn around and print out using the standard system.out.println. Okay, now let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see more of the rest of the code before we execute it. So notice here we're computing a batting average. We've got hits and at-bats as integers, and we're doing integer division here normally, but notice that we're using a casting operator to turn this entire expression into a floating point result. Then we're going to print the resulting batting average out, as we said, in 3 different ways. This is the raw calculated quantity with lots of decimal places. We're going to print it out using one format. We're going to print it out using another format. So again, here we're using a format specifier, and this is the data we want to print. In the second case, we're using string.format internally. So here's the format we want. Here's the data we're going to apply to it. This entire quantity will be one string, and then we'll print it out using println, as we always do. And we'll do the same thing for the other calculations as well. Here's the cost of a car in US dollars. Here's the calculation with a sales tax. So we'll print out the raw price of the car, the price with sales tax, which should have a lot of decimal places, and then we'll print the total price out in 2 ways. One using printf, the other one using format, and we should again see the same result twice. Here's the same calculation applied to Japanese yen. All we're doing here is we're multiplying the total price by an exchange rate, but then printing it out in the same fashion, except notice that now we're using a different format string. This is the one that has the yen symbol embedded in it. Finally, let's say we're doing something for human resources. Here's one of our assets names. Here's his employee number. We're going to print out the name, tab separator, and we're going to print out the ID. Then we'll print it out using this format specifier, and we're going to print out these two pieces of information, a string and an integer number, and we're going to print it out two different ways with two different formats. So far so good. Okay, let's go back to the top of this. As always, we'll compile it. Let's set a breakpoint on main, and let's start single stepping our way through. We'll give ourselves a little more real estate so we can see what's going on here. Hit the debug. We'll set up our constants. Scroll down a little bit so we can see what's going on. So notice here we're just setting up our formats. These are just simple strings, but they contain within them the way we want the data to appear when we use them. So these are nothing but formatting strings, and we've intentionally carved these out of the printing step by creating these up front as formatting strings. So now we're going to do the batting average calculation. 100 hits, 300 at-bats, batting average of .33333333333. This is what we'd see if we printed it out in its raw format, but if we apply a format to it, we get it in the nice traditional 3 decimal place format. Moving down a little bit, here's the price of our car, the price with sales tax. We'll print it out. Actually, there's the price with sales tax, and notice we've got a lot of residual numerical crap here that we want to get rid of. What we'll do is we'll apply the two formatting statements, and notice we've got the same result displayed two different ways with a leading dollar sign, 3 decimal place commas, and 2 decimal places of cents, exactly as specified in our format statement. Let's scroll down. We'll do the same thing for the car price in Japanese yen. So we'll compute the price, and notice that because of the exchange rate, it's a much bigger number. So here's the price in Japanese yen. Here's the price with tax in Japanese yen. Okay, big long numbers, lots of decimal places. But if we apply these formatting strings to it, we can make this output appear a lot nicer and more palatable with this leading yen symbol, 3 decimal place comma separation, and only 2 decimal places appearing. Finally, for our human resources application, here's the name of our spy, Mr. James Bond. His employee ID, of course, is 7. And there's his name and his ID, which doesn't look nearly as cool as it should. So let's print it out again in 2 different ways using a format string, again, that we've specified up front. And we're going to print out the name and the ID using this format. So now we get the same string, but we're applying a format which puts some leading zeros in a 3-space wide field, and now we get the more expected 007. And we'll do the same thing again in a slightly different way using string.format, but the result is going to be the same. Okay, so just to recap, we set up all our data formats here, and we're specifying what we want the outputs to look like. We've got format specifiers embedded within these strings. We've got labeling text. Here's a unit of currency. Here's a Unicode unit of currency. We've got control characters for formatting. Here's a tab. And remember that when we're printing things out with printf, we need to explicitly include a new line if we want to kick the result down to the next line. But this is an application of format specifiers. Here are our calculations, and here are 2 different ways of printing things out using those format specifiers. So this is the kind of thing I'm going to be wanting you to do in a current program assignment, and I hope this will give you some useful examples of how to go about doing that. If this all doesn't quite make sense yet, feel free to back up and run through this on your own with a debugger at your own pace and kind of stare at it and let it sink in for a little bit.